Part 116. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 1151. Su Tianqian was speechless, then turned his head and hummed softly. I couldn't help but laugh. Su Tianqian heard my laughter and said angrily, "Every time you do this, you don't know how to let me go." Every time she wanted to make me feel embarrassed, she would ask me to find a way to fight back. I smiled and replied, "I'll let you do it next time." Now that the matter in Xiangxiang ancient kingdom has been settled, it is time to go to Yaokai. Yaokai is the place where the Queen Mother of the West lived in ancient myths and legends. It is located on the Kunlun Mountains. Our Lady of Yaokai is also known as the Golden Mother and the Queen Mother of the West. In people's hearts, the image of Our Lady is that of a graceful, noble, and kind goddess with a transcendent status. She lives in the sacred land of Yaokai in Kunlun Mountain. Su Tianqian is going to Yaokai to accept the inheritance, and I can roughly guess her true identity. The Saint of Yaokai. However, how did the Holy Maiden of Yaokai survive in the world? This is something I don't understand. I put the question on my mind. After hearing this, Su Tianqian also looked confused. She said, "Since I can remember, I have been wandering and living in no fixed place. Later, when I met your grandfather, my destiny changed. The reason why I came to Kunlun Mountain is because I have been living in Kunlun Mountain since I was a child." A voice will appear repeatedly in my mind, that is, "Let me come to Yaokai." I don't know much about my life experience, but I should be able to find out this time. I thought for a while and asked, "Then how did you know that you are a god's wife?" Su Tianqian slowly spit out two words. Divination. Su Tianxian's divination ability is very strong. It was because of her presence that the things I encountered before could have been avoided. It seems that if you want to find out Su Tianxian's life experience, you can only go to Yaokai. I suddenly thought of something and said, "You must have been in pain all these years, right?" Su Tianqian was stunned for a moment, then his expression became extremely calm, and he said, "The matter is over, there is no pain to speak of." Su Tianqian just said that she has been homeless since she was a child. In other words, Su Tianqian started wandering as a child. How difficult it must be for a little girl to wander around the world. Perhaps this is her character. She maintains an indifferent attitude towards herself and everything. Only to me will she reveal her nature and the character hidden in her heart. Aloof, indifferent, it's just her disguise. I didn't say anything, I just held her hand. I looked around and had to find a way to leave the underworld. There is an entrance and an exit to the underworld, but it is easier to get in than to get out. The only person who knew the exit had also disappeared. That is Cheetah. This guy must know the exit, but he has disappeared since we entered here. Gotta find a way to find him. I dug into my pocket and found a tuft of hair. Su Tianqian could tell what I was going to do with just one glance. The hair in my hand was obtained from meeting Cheetah in that bunker. From the beginning, I didn't trust this guy wholeheartedly. Keeping his hair is also to find him. Now Cai Dai is weak and falls into a brief coma. If Cai Dai is there, he will appear by himself without looking for him, because Cai Dai has already poisoned him. I put my hair on the ground, muttered something immediately, and used the soul-searching technique. Soon, the hair on the ground floated up and flew quickly in one direction. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 1152. Su Tianqian and I didn't hesitate at all and rushed in the direction where the hair was floating. I also left marks along the way to prevent Lu Hangxuan from not being able to find the exit to the underworld after coming out of the Dragon Gate. Soon, a large frozen tree came into view. This tree is so towering that it blocks out the sun. Each leaf is covered with thin crystal ice. The whole tree looks like it is carved out of ice. It is so beautiful and beautiful. At this moment, I suddenly saw a sneaky figure out of the corner of my eye. I frowned, and that person also noticed me, turned around and ran away. I directly used the nine heavens realm and disappeared instantly. When I reappeared, I was already in front of him. When Chide saw me, he stepped back repeatedly, turned around, and was about to continue running. I waved my hand casually, and Chide's legs were cut off by me. But strangely, no blood flowed from the cross-section where his legs were severed. This is the ability of the Nine Eyes Heaven realm. As long as the things or people that exist here are lower in strength than me, I can control them as I please. The Nine Eyes Heaven realm can also create illusions, but I rarely use these two abilities. Cheetah fell directly to the ground. When he saw his legs separated from his upper body, he was frightened out of his wits. He screamed, What is going on?" I walked towards Chide step by step. "Tell me, how to get out of here." Cheetah looked at me with a horrified expression and asked in disbelief, "How did you find me?" I didn't answer his question, I just asked coldly, "I'm asking you again, how do you get out of here?" Cheetah's throat squirmed, he swallowed crazily, and his whole body was trembling. He replied, I don't know." I looked cold, and with a wave of my hand, Cheetah's arms were cut off directly, but still no blood flowed out. Cheetah screamed and said quickly, I said, the exit is that tree." I glanced at the frozen towering trees, and then withdrew from the Nine Heavens realm. The moment the Nine Eyes Heaven realm disappeared, Chide's body unexpectedly recovered. Everything that just happened was actually an illusion. If you don't give this guy some color, he won't tell the truth. I carried Cheetah with one hand and came to the tree and asked sharply, "Tell me, how do I get out of here?" Cheetah said tremblingly, "As long as the ice on this tree is melted, you can leave here. It is not difficult for me to melt the ice." Su Tianxian came to my side, looked up at the towering tree, then nodded at me and said, "He probably didn't lie. Now that he knows how to leave here, the sins Cheetah has committed must be repaid." I looked at Cheetah and said, "It is not allowed by nature that you borrowed a corpse to bring back a soul. You have destroyed so many lives. Now it is time for you to pay the price you deserve." When Cheetah heard my words, his face turned pale. I suddenly stretched out my hand, and the soul-stealing blood hand appeared directly, and I pulled out Chide's soul. At the same time, he opened the door to the underworld and threw his soul directly in. Such people will be punished by God. I looked at the big tree that was frozen, and when I turned my right hand, karma fire emerged from my palm. Just when I was about to throw my karma fire at the trees, Su Tianxian stopped me. "You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 1153. I looked at Su Tianxian in confusion. Su Tianxian replied, "This tree supports the entire underworld. If you use karma fire, I'm afraid we will be trapped here before the passage appears. The fire of karma can burn all evil things in this world. The tree in front of me is the key to supporting the existence of the underworld. No matter what kind of yin realm it is, there will always be a yin eye. As long as this yin eye is destroyed, the entire yin realm will collapse, and you will not be able to escape even if you have great abilities." I looked at Su Tianxian and asked, "Then what method should I use?" Su Tianxian pondered for a moment and said, "Zai Wei Tianhuo, as long as you can control the strength, you can ensure that the tree is not burned, and you can also melt the ice and snow attached to it." I nodded. Zai Wei Tianhuo is the original fire of the stars. It was originally formed by the light of the seven stars of Tianzhu, Tianxian, Tianji, Tianquan, Yuhang, Qiang, and Yaoguang, which condensed into one star and condensed the power of the seven stars. The crepe myrtle sky fire. Xiao Hei's flame is also extremely powerful and comparable to Zai Wei's sky fire. However, his cultivation level is too low and he is still unable to use his own advantages. If the strength increases greatly in the future, it will definitely be able to play a great role. Thinking of this, I didn't hesitate at all. I made the formula with both hands and muttered the words. There were dark clouds in the sky. As I chanted the mantra more frequently, the dark clouds dissipated and 7 stars slowly appeared in the night sky. These are the 7 stars. Only people with Zai Wei destiny can mobilize the power of these 7 stars. Even if others have the ability to reach the sky, they cannot mobilize the power of the 7 stars, let alone summon the purple heavenly fire. The 7 stars emitted dazzling light. I slowly stretched out my hand, and the power of the 7 stars gathered in my hand. The next moment, a purple flame appeared from my palm. This flame contains the power of the vast stars, and its power is even greater than the karma fire. I took a deep breath and threw the purple flame towards the towering tree that was frozen. When the purple flame touched the big tree, the spark of fire showed the potential of starting a prairie fire, instantly igniting the entire big tree. Compared to the coldness of karma fire, Zai Wei fire seems very hot. In the blink of an eye, the ice on the entire tree melted. Seeing that the time was right, I quickly withdrew the purple sky fire. The purple sky fire slowly disappeared, replaced by a lush tree. Next, something magical happened. Centered on the towering tree in front of us, life began to spread toward the frozen ancient country of Shangsheng. A world frozen for thousands of years reappears in this world. Seeing this situation, I asked with some confusion, Tianqian, why did the entire underworld become like this? Su Tianqian lowered his eyebrows and pondered, and replied after a moment, the yin realm is where the yin qi gathers, and the yin qi is supported by the yin eyes. Each yin eye has its own way of disappearing. As long as this method is found, the entire yin realm will be destroyed. It will return to its original appearance, and of course it will also break down the barrier between the real world and the underworld. Hearing Su Tianxuan's explanation, I became even more confused. I asked, Tianqian, isn't that the same in the underworld? Su Tianqian was slightly startled, shook his head at me and said, I don't know. In a sense, the underworld is indeed the same as the underworld, but the underworld has existed for too long and is too mysterious. I don't know whether to verify this fact. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 1154. I nodded and didn't ask any more questions. I always feel that the upcoming riots in the underworld are likely to be related to the yin eye. The entire ancient country of Xiangzhong reappeared in the world, and the underworld was naturally broken. I glanced at Su Tianqian and said, let's go. Su Tianqian hummed softly, stepped forward, and gently held my arm. She did this movement very naturally, not as awkward as before. As time went by, the distance between me and her grew closer and closer. 2 hearts, 2. We rushed towards the top of Kunlun Mountain. On the way, Su Tianqian suddenly said to me, Xiao Su, I don't know whether I am right or wrong in bringing you here this time. I looked at Su Tianqian with some confusion and asked, why do you say that? Su Tianqian raised his eyes, with complex expressions in his eyes. She opened her mouth and hesitated for a while before saying, I don't know much about Yaokai, I'm afraid there will be any danger if you and I come here this time. The fear in people's hearts often comes from the unknown. All Taoist priests in heaven and earth will come to Kunlun Mountain after attaining Taoism and becoming immortals. Because the Queen Mother of the West and the Prince of the East were in charge of the affairs of men and women cultivating immortals and becoming immortals. Many people may not know the name Dongwang Centimeter, but his other name is widely known. That is Emperor Donghua. In the folk of the Han Dynasty, Dongguangong corresponded to the Queen Mother of the West and was considered to be the deity representing the yang of yin and yang. At the same time, influenced by the thought of immortality in the Qin and Han dynasties, the East Prince and the Queen Mother of the West together served as the main gods of the world of immortality after death. Her status is comparable to that of the Queen Mother of the West. This trip was not as simple as imagined. Su Tianqian and I were on the road during the day and found a random cave to rest at night. I used dry wood and built a bonfire. I found these dry firewood at a lower altitude and carried them all the way to the snow-capped mountains. Su Tianqian felt sorry for me and told me not to carry it. Su Tianqian and I are both mortal bodies. If we don't have a bonfire to keep warm at night, something might happen. In other words, I don't want Su Tianqian to suffer from the cold. Su Tianqian sat next to the bonfire, the warm red firelight illuminated her beautiful face. She looked at the burning fire quietly, and the reflection of the bonfire appeared in her clear eyes, making her whole person look extremely beautiful. I came and sat down next to her. Before I could speak, Su Tianqian buried her head in my chest like a well-behaved kitten. I asked, "What are you thinking about?" Su Tianqian shook his head slightly at me and replied, "I didn't think about anything." Taking this opportunity, I asked, "When do you plan to fulfill those words you said in my ears last time?" After hearing this, Su Tianqian blushed slightly and murmured in a low voice, "Wait until I finish the inheritance." In response, I smiled slightly and said nothing. The two of us were sitting quietly like this, and Su Tianqian suddenly said to me, "Do you know why I made that request to you?" I shook my head and replied, "I don't know." Su Tianqian hugged me tightly and said, "I'm afraid you will leave me and leave me alone in this world." This is not the first time Su Tianqian has said this. Su Tianqian had revealed the news that I was leaving more than once before. This makes me very confused. Why should I leave her? However, Zhao Mian's words in the sky coffin made me understand something. The coffin was born because of me, and it is destined to end because of me. At this moment, dull footsteps sounded at the entrance of the cave. I looked stern. Someone is coming. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 1155. The footsteps were getting closer and closer. I glanced at Su Tianqian and saw her face was calm and she said to me, "Don't panic." My eyes were fixed on the direction of the cave entrance, and the two rickety figures were reflected in the light of the bonfire. The figure was getting closer and closer, and through the dim light of the campfire, I could clearly see the person coming. They were two old men, a man and a woman. The two of them were wearing yellow Taoist robes and looked like they should be Taoist disciples. The old man's body was hunched over, and his face was covered with wrinkles like tree bark. His face was pale and devoid of any human vitality. The same goes for the old lady. Her face is pale and her expression is numb, but her lips and cheeks are extremely bright red, giving the impression that she is just like the two paper figures placed in front of the morning hall. Although the two old men looked strange, they were undoubtedly alive. You can tell by the shadow cast by the firelight on the ground. The two old Taoist priests were slightly startled when they saw me and Su Tianqian, and then they looked at each other. Neither Su Tianqian nor I spoke. But the two old Taoist priests kept their eyes on Su Tianqian and refused to look away. The old man screamed, "Master Tianqian!" Obviously, the two guys knew Su Tianqian. But if you think about it carefully, with Su Tianqian's strength, there is no one in the yin and yang realms who would not recognize him. Su Tianqian looked calm, looked at the two people calmly, and said nothing. The two old Taoist priests seemed very enthusiastic and hurriedly came to Su Tianqian and asked, "Master Tianqian, do you also come here to ascend?" Su Tianqian's cold eyes slowly swept over the two people and said lightly, "No." At this moment, Su Tianqian's performance was completely different from before. The two old Taoist priests seemed to know Su Tianqian's character and didn't ask any more questions. The old man said, "With Master Tianqian's Taoism, if you want to ascend, you have already ascended." There must be other reasons for coming to Kunlun Mountain. The old lady on the side echoed, that's right, who in the world of yin and yang doesn't know the name of Master Tianxian? The two of them began to flatter each other, and finally turned their attention to me and asked, Master Tianxian, is this, your disciple? Su Tianxian said calmly, no. I was stunned and looked at Su Tianxian in confusion. Su Tianxian slowly said, he is my man. As soon as these words came out, not only the two old guys were stunned on the spot. I never thought that Su Tianxian would say such things in front of others. This is actually a bit beyond my imagination. The two old Taoist priests looked at each other and took a deep breath. Then he said in disbelief, I didn't expect that there is really a man in this world who can get into the eyes of Master Tianxian. I started a conversation with two old Taoist priests. The two old men are casual cultivators and do not belong to any section. However, they feel that their Taoism has reached the point where they can almost ascend. So came here. All cultivators in the world who want to break through the bottleneck of ascension will come here. Some people will break through the bottleneck in Kunlun Mountain, while others will return disappointed. However, it can't be said that they returned disappointed, because none of the people looking for Yaokai were able to go back. No one knows what happened to these Taoist priests. After a short conversation, I realized that Yaokai is far from being as simple as I imagined. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 1156. Although the two old Taoist priests looked a bit strange and made people feel uncomfortable, after talking with each other, I found that they did not have any bad intentions. On the contrary, they were good Taoist priests who slayed demons and subdued them. This is really in line with the saying, people cannot be judged by appearance, and sea water cannot be measured. Since these two old Taoist priests have the same purpose as ours, after discussing with Su Tianxian decided to go with them. Su Tianxian also heard about these two Taoist priests. Both have a good reputation and are not evil cultivators. Therefore, Su Tianxian and I agreed to the idea of spending the night here. Early the next morning, we continued to the top of Kunlun Mountain. The altitude gets higher and higher, and the air gets thinner and thinner. I can only use the purple energy in my body to resist the cold. Su Tianxian seemed very indifferent. She glanced at me and asked, are you cold? I replied, it's okay. Su Tianxian hesitated, stretched out his hand, took my hand, and asked, what about this? I rolled my eyes, then pulled her into my arms and said, it feels a lot warmer this way. You. Su Tianxian was speechless. But there was no struggle. We don't know how long we walked, but it got dark. Just when we were trying to find a place to rest, a golden light suddenly lit up not far away. Su Tianxian and I looked at each other. Su Tianxian pondered for a moment and said, according to legend, on the way to Yaokai, you will pass by a Feng Xiu Inn. There will be a special person there to pick you up and take you to Yaokai. Feng Xiu Inn is similar to the underworld in that Su Tianxian and I entered before. Ordinary people who want to enter the underworld must pass through the Yin Yang Inn. The same is true for Yaokai. Ordinary people must pass through Feng Xiu Inn, and then a ferry will come to pick you up. When we saw the golden light, we rushed towards it without any hesitation. Soon, an inn appeared in front of me. The inn was covered in wind and snow, with two red lanterns hanging in front of the door. The warm red light reflected the white snow on the ground a fiery red. But where the lantern cannot be found, the ground is covered with silvery white, because the bright moon hanging in the night sky emits a cool light. Moonlight, snow, lanterns, merged into one picture, everything seemed so natural. Su Tianxian and I walked towards Feng Xiu Inn. The two Taoist priests followed us. Just as he arrived at the door, the wooden door suddenly opened with a creak. Two women in white dresses slowly walked out. These two women are very beautiful. They are dressed in white dresses and have a fairy spirit. Fairy from Yaokai. However, I felt a strange aura on them. Four of you, please come inside. The four of us walked inside. The two women in white put their eyes on Su Tianqian, and their expression suddenly changed. The two people fell to their knees with a plop and said respectfully to Su Tianqian, "You are back." Su Tianqian frowned slightly, and it was obvious that she was also a little confused. "Get up." The two women in white stood up in fear and looked at Su Tianqian with eyes filled with respect. I couldn't help but joked, I didn't expect that my Tianxuan's status is quite high. Su Tianqian was just about to reply when he saw the two women in white with angry expressions on their faces and said to me, "How dare you? How dare you disrespect the saint?" Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 1157. As soon as I finished speaking, two fairies dressed in white flashed and attacked me. I frowned. What was going on with these two guys? What did Su Tianqian and I have to do with them? In the blink of an eye, two women in white were in front of me. Two women in white picked up the Taoist Thunder Ju and blasted it towards me. My expression condensed. The thunder techniques performed by the two men were very powerful, comparable to the 9th layer thunder technique and the 4th layer thunder technique. I suddenly stretched out my left hand, and the pure lotus mark on my palm emitted holy white light. The white light spread instantly and enveloped me at an extremely fast speed. With a bang, the thunder techniques performed by the two women exploded in the white light emitted by the Jinglian mark. Although the thunder techniques performed by the two men were powerful, they still could not shake Jinglian in the slightest. The two women in white were still unyielding and continued to attack me. I was very angry about the behavior of these two people. I clearly didn't do anything, and these two guys in front of me were going to kill me. Anyway, I couldn't bear it any longer. I held my hand in the air and summoned Jing Xiao. Just as I was about to raise my sword and attack the two women, Su Tianqian stopped in front of me. She glanced coldly at the two women in white and said, "How presumptuous." Su Tianxuan's voice was so cold that I got goosebumps just listening to it. The two women in white fell to their knees with a plop, bowed their heads and remained silent. Su Tianqian glanced at the two women coldly, said nothing, took my hand, and walked towards the guest room on the second floor. She directly opened a room, pulled me in and walked in. I looked at Su Tianqian with some confusion and asked, "Tianqian, are you familiar with this place?" Su Tianqian hesitated, turned to me, shook his head slightly, and replied, I don't know, this is my first time here, but I feel like I have been here before." Su Tianqian closed the door, came to me, and said, "Although they call me a saint, they give me a strange feeling. Anyway, we should be more careful tonight. Women's intuition is often very accurate." I nodded and asked, "Tianqian, are they two fairies?" Su Tianqian shook his head and replied, "Probably not, neither gods nor immortals will stay in the human world. The two of them should be ghosts and immortals. Ghost immortal is also called spirit ghost. Ghost immortal is one of the 5 immortals. The underworld is transcendent, the gods are unknown, the ghost gates have no surnames, and the 3 mountains have no names. Although there is no reincarnation, it is difficult to return to Penying. In the end, there is nowhere to go, just give up when you are reincarnated. In essence, ghosts and immortals are still ghosts. The reason why there are immortals is because the soul has Taoism, cultivation, and some abilities. In a sense, ghosts are similar to ghosts and immortals. Su Tianqian suddenly became very uneasy. She took my hand and said, "Xiao Su, I regret bringing you here. The closer I get to Yaokai, the more uneasy I feel. I'm afraid something will happen to you." I smiled at Su Tianqian and said, there will be difficulties, but, Tianqian, you have to know that no matter what happens, as long as the two of us are together, there is nothing we can't accomplish. Su Tianqian lowered his eyes, not knowing what he was thinking. I continued, think about Penglai Immortal Island. At that time, in such a dangerous situation, I even snatched you back, let alone what happens later. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 1158. Su Tianqian hummed and said nothing. Instead, he came to the door and listened carefully to what was going on outside. This was the first time I saw such a cautious look on Su Tianxuan's face. I came to Su Tianqian, patted her shoulder gently and said, Tianqian, relax, don't be so nervous. If something really happens, we will face it together. Su Tianqian hummed softly. Then, I asked, Tianqian, how should we go to Yaokai? Su Tianqian pondered for a moment and replied, don't worry, someone will knock on the door when the time comes. I nodded. Su Tianqian was sitting beside the bed, and I quickly moved over. Su Tianqian rolled her eyes and moved aside. I shrugged helplessly. Rest. I said to Su Tianqian. Lie on the wooden bed, close your eyes, and plan to take a short rest. In the past few days, I haven't been able to take a good rest. I have been traveling in the wind and snow every day. I secretly opened my eyes a crack and saw Su Tianqian sitting by the bed, looking at me with a look of resentment on his face. It was funny in my heart, maybe I was too tired, so I fell asleep quickly. Drowsily, I felt Su Tianqian get into my arms and bury his head in my chest. I opened my eyes and found Su Tianqian curled up in my arms like a kitten. Her hair was as black as ink, and her delicious fragrance lingered on the tip of my nose. I slowly stretched out my hand and lifted up her pretty face. Su Tianxuan's star-like eyes were looking at me quietly. I was just about to speak when I saw Su Tianqian stretched out her slender hand and gently touched my face. She said softly, Xiao Su, why didn't I realize that you are pretty before? I smiled slightly and said, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. What about me? Am I beautiful in your eyes? I rolled my eyes, isn't this nonsense? There is no one more beautiful than Su Tianqian in the world. Of course it's beautiful. Su Tianqian seemed to have thought of something, and suddenly turned his face to the side and said, I still remember that you and Feng Luan were married. I was slightly startled. I did marry Miao Feng Luan, but it was all to save her. Are you jealous? Su Tianqian was stunned for a moment, turned around and said, of course not, but, I know Feng Luan's feelings for you, you plan to. I stretched out my hand and gently touched Su Tianxuan's red lips. I only love you. Su Tianxuan's eyes flashed with a hint of shyness and she stopped talking. I held her but felt a little complicated. I'm not a fool. I naturally know Miao Fengluan's feelings for me. However, she and I are destined to be together, and in my heart, she will always be a friend. Time passed by, Su Tianqian was breathing evenly in his arms, and he obviously fell asleep. I originally wanted to rest, but if I fell asleep and something happened later, it would be troublesome. About 3 hours later, there was a knock on the door. I frowned and stood up slowly. At the same time, Su Tianqian in my arms suddenly opened his eyes. She and I looked at each other, then came to the door. I stretched out my hand and opened the door. A bone-chilling wind poured in from the outside. I looked around and saw that there was nothing outside the corridor. Just when I was wondering, a figure suddenly appeared. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 1159. The sudden appearance of a figure startled me. I looked closely and saw that it was the old Taoist priest. I originally thought it was the person who came to take us to Yaokai, but I didn't expect it was him. The old Taoist priest's face looked particularly gloomy in the dim environment. I asked, "What's the matter with you?" The old Taoist priest looked around, looking a little cautious, and whispered, "This is not the place to talk." After saying that, the old Taoist priest entered the room. The old Taoist priest's mysterious appearance gave me a bad feeling. I closed the door and asked, "What happened?" The old Taoist priest lowered his voice and replied, "There is something very wrong with this inn." Su Tianxian and I looked at each other, and I asked again, "What's the problem?" A look of fear flashed in the old Taoist priest's eyes, and his old body trembled slightly. "There are only 4 of us alive in the entire inn, and the rest are all dead." As soon as these words came out, my brows instantly furrowed. Since entering this inn, I have seen those 2 ghost fairies, but as for the others, I have not seen them. "Why do you say that?" The old Taoist priest took a deep breath and replied, "I just opened a room out of curiosity and found, there was a coffin placed in that room. Not just in that room, but in other rooms too. I opened the coffin, and there was a dead man wearing a monk's robe inside." As soon as the old Taoist priest finished speaking, there was a dull knock on the door. The knock on the door was very urgent, as if something was about to rush in from the outside. Su Tianxian came to the door, stretched out her slender hand, and opened the door. The ghost fairy in white appeared at the door. Her face was pale, without any blood on her face, and her eyes were full of coldness. She knelt down on one knee towards Su Tianxian and said, "Saint, if someone wants to see you, please move. I will take you there now." Su Tianxian looked at her coldly and said, "If he wants to see me, let him come by himself." Gaixian shook his head slightly at Su Tianxian and replied, "Please move, this is very important to you." Su Tianxian glanced at me, and I smiled at her and said, "Go ahead, I'll wait for you here." I know that Su Tianxian doesn't want to be separated from me, especially in such a strange environment. If something happened, she wouldn't be able to take care of me right away. Su Tianxian hesitated again and said, "Okay, then you should be careful." I nodded, and Su Tianxian turned around and was about to leave, but then she thought of something. She stagnated in her steps, turned back suddenly, and walked in 2 steps to come to me. She fell into my arms and hugged my waist tightly. This action made the ghost fairy clench his fists tightly and reveal a sinister look on his face. His eyes made him want to cut me into pieces with 1,000 knives. Su Tianxian raised his head and whispered in my ear, "Be careful. If I don't come back, you can find me through Xinwen. Similarly, if something happens to you, I can arrive as soon as possible." I nodded towards Su Tianxian and replied, "You should be careful about everything." Su Tianxian left my arms, followed Gaixian, and left the room. Watching Su Tianxian leave, I inevitably felt disappointed. I looked at the old Taoist priest and said, "This inn is very weird. You should go back to your room first. This can also ensure your safety." Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 1160. The old Taoist priest nodded, turned, and left. I followed him out and frowned as I watched the old Taoist priest leave. This old Taoist priest is a little strange, but I can't tell where the strangeness lies. Just when I was about to turn around and enter the room, an old voice suddenly sounded in my ears. "Cough, cough, cough." I looked condensed and looked back, only to see an old lady with silver hair appearing at the other end of the corridor. The old lady looks very old, but her skin has no wrinkles at all. Even her skin color is as white and smooth as a newly broken egg. I originally wanted to pretend that I didn't see this old lady and didn't want to cause trouble in my life. But the old lady suddenly spoke to me and said, "Little brother, I'm afraid you will never see that girl again from now on." As soon as these words came out, I felt bad. There is no way that the old lady in front of me would say such things to me for no reason. She must know something. I said to the old lady, "What do you mean?" The old lady stooped and staggered toward me, coughing as she walked. However, her various behaviors are a bit artificial in my eyes. Because although she looks very old, she is full of energy, and there is a playful look between her eyebrows. I seriously doubt that I have seen it wrong, because how can an old lady show such a playful look? Girly and playful? She came to me, looked at me and asked, "You want to know?" I nodded and replied, "I think so." The old lady smiled and said, "Then let me in." Helpless, I could only let this old lady enter the room. I closed the door and kept a certain distance from the old lady. I asked, "Can you say it now?" The old lady stretched her muscles and said a little tiredly, "Oh, my thighs and shoulders are a little painful, how about you kid help me rub them and squeeze them?" I frowned, what on earth is this old lady doing? In order to understand what the old lady said, I could only come to the old lady, reach out my hand, and gently rub her shoulders. While rubbing it, I asked, "Old lady, do you know something? If you know something, please tell me as soon as possible." The old lady's face was full of enjoyment and she said to me casually, "That little girl is the god's wife, and you are so close to her. What do you think you will face?" As soon as these words came out, I was shocked. Who was the old lady in front of me? Do you actually know that Su Tianqian is the god's wife? Who are you? The old lady smiled and did not answer my question. She continued, "As far as I know, Queen Mother Naxi has a very good relationship with that god. Let me ask you, when you and that little girl came here, how do you feel? What will Queen Mother 11 do to you?" I frowned and replied, "She wants to kill me." The old lady nodded with satisfaction and praised, "Not stupid yet. Oops, I feel a little pain when I retreat. Please help me press it." As he said that, he stretched out his right leg and asked me to pinch it. I don't know the identity of the old lady in front of me, but the fact that she can tell me these things proves that she does not want to harm me, but is here to help me. I put her legs on my knees and squeezed them, but what happened next shocked me.